First of all, I want to thank you guys for coming today. In particular, I want to thank the media for helping us get this message out to this community. There's been some coverage throughout the day since the early morning hours, and I think it's important that we also communicate to the community that this crime has been solved. I want to describe to you what took place beginning in the early morning hours of today, and I will finish by explaining the charges that have just recently been filed by my office, and we will make sure we save plenty of time for questions afterwards. Yesterday, Friday, December 28th, about 11:55 p.m., the St. Charles City Police Department received a 911 call. The call was from a residence located here in the city limits. The caller indicated that there was active shooting going on in the home at the time. The 911 call, having just listened to it today, you can hear the gunshots in the background. It's extremely chilling. Within a matter of minutes, the first two officers responded to the scene. They observed a white Chevy Silverado running in the driveway. At that time, they didn't know anything about what had taken place. All they knew was the fact that there had been a reported shooting inside the residence. They saw a subject exit the residence and enter the vehicle and begin to exit the subdivision. There's one way out of that subdivision. So the officers immediately contacted dispatch, gave a description as well as the driver's license plate number. Within a matter of minutes after that, other officers were able to identify that white Chevy Silverado exiting the neighborhood. They attempted to initiate a traffic stop, which they eventually did within less than a half mile of the neighborhood. At the time the traffic stop was initiated, again, we didn't know what was going on. Officers only knew that there was a reported shooting. The suspect refused to exit the vehicle, and the suspect opened fire on the two officers. I can tell you that tragedy was averted. One of the bullet holes from the subject's gun pierced the door frame right in front of where the officer was standing. One of the two officers was standing. Fortunately, neither of our officers were hurt. Immediately after the shooting, the suspect fled on foot. The area that we're talking about is heavily wooded. Obviously, it's the middle of the night, so there wasn't a lot of light around, no artificial light, and he was basically off the grid for some period of time. Fast forward less than a half hour later, there is a report of a victim being stabbed. There was a carjacking attempt. What officers found out was a suspect who the victim couldn't identify by face, but was able to provide a description of his clothing, which matched the description that not only the officers on the scene at the residence observed, but also the officers who were engaged in the traffic stop observed. All three of those descriptions matched. This victim indicated that she was stabbed, and some unknown male suspect attempted to take her car. He was not able to start the car, and she was stabbed, I believe, 7 times. She is remarkably recovering, and she's going to be okay. Obviously, she's in critical condition at the moment, but she was able to provide us with the information that we needed. From there, the major case squad was activated. St. Charles City Police Department, all hands on deck, were in a massive manhunt for a particular individual at this time who was identified as Richard Emery. Mr. Emery was ultimately found in a bathroom at a local gas station, approximately, I would say, 2 miles from the scene of the shooting. He was bleeding profusely and suffering from what appeared to be gunshot wounds. We don't know for sure, but it's reasonable to assume that the gunshot wounds took place when he opened fire on the police officers. From there, he was taken into custody, was read his Miranda rights, and basically refused to provide any statements. I can tell you that while all this was going on, other officers responded to the scene of the residence. The residence was locked. They had to force entry. Upon entering the residence, the body of a 39-year-old female was found in the master bedroom. She was still alive at the time. although obviously in critical condition. She was not able to provide any real information to the officers, obviously given her massive injuries, gunshot wounds. Officers then responded down to the downstairs bedroom, and they observed that the doorway had been forced open prior to them arriving there. And sadly, they observed the dead body of a 61-year-old female, an 8-year-old little girl, and a 10-year-old boy, all in the bedroom, all suffered from gunshot wounds. As a result of all of what I've just described to you, in total we have 4 victims who are deceased, ages 8, 10, 39, and 61. The relationship between who we believe the shooter to be, Richard Emery, was that he was living there. He was the paramour, the boyfriend of the 39-year-old deceased female, and the 2 children were the children of the deceased female, and the 61-year-old female was the mother of the deceased, as well as the grandmother of the children who were deceased. At this point, the evidence is very much open still. The investigation is very much ongoing. We don't know what a motive would have been at this point, but we are very comfortable that Mr. Emery was in fact the shooter. This all took place over a matter of probably 8 hours, in the early morning hours. And I can say that with the help of the major case squad and the efforts of the St. Charles City Police Department, it's amazing how quickly this was resolved. We, just within the last half hour, have charged Richard Emery with the following offenses: murder in the first degree, armed criminal action, 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 assault in the first degree, armed criminal action, assault in the first degree, armed criminal action, assault in the first degree, armed criminal action, and attempted robbery in the first degree. All told, we have 15 counts right now pending against Mr. Emery. There may be other counts as we move forward, but as I said, this investigation is very much ongoing, and we'll need to wait to see how the evidence unfolds. Anytime a human life is lost, it's a tragic situation, and this one in particular is extremely tragic and sad. What can possess someone to take the life of a child? It's beyond me. I don't know how anyone could ever do such a thing. And we may never know. But I think it's important that we need to emphasize that the community is safe. We have had a series of violent crimes here in the very recent history over the last few months. There's no connection between these crimes. In fact, these crimes exemplify something that exists in any community, anywhere across the country. These were domestic violence in nature. This one in particular was the worst example of a domestic violence case. Anytime you have a domestic violence case, you always worry about the safety of the victim, and this would be your worst nightmare, that something like this could happen. I want to publicly thank the St. Charles City Police Department, as well as the major case squad, for working around the clock. I know, talking to some of the officers who've been involved, they've been awake since 5:30 yesterday morning. They put a lot of work in, but it's been good work. I think this gives us a chance to, instead of focusing on the rash of violence that this community has suffered recently, I think we need to discuss the reality of domestic violence. It does exist, and it's here, it's everywhere, and this is one of those things where we need to remind the community, if you see something, say something. If you see something that doesn't look right, say something. Maybe you save a life. Again, at this point, it's an ongoing investigation. There's a lot that we don't know yet, but I anticipate we will find out.